podcast is undergoing just a little facelift. And when we return, you'll find us each week on your favorite streaming platforms like Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV, as well as continuing to go live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Plus, we'll still be on all the podcast channels. So we're taking just a little break, and we'll launch the new season beginning in early January. And because we wrapped up season 5 at the end of October, we decided to bring back some of our most popular episodes to fill the gap. So if you missed these episodes, it's your chance to catch up on the brilliant insights, practical tips, and heart-centered advice from my guests for women in careers who feel stuck where they don't belong. Now, don't go anywhere because we're going to start this reprised episode in just a moment. Welcome to Tips for the Transition, where we have deep, meaningful conversations about life. We talk about how significant changes like divorce, grief, and career change can affect us, our family, our relationships, and our work, and how to move beyond them. I'm your host, Maria Tomás-Keegan, certified career and life coach for women, and I'm here to support you through the messy seasons of life so you can answer big questions like who am I now and how do I move on from here? If you're ready to consider new options, be inspired, and meet incredible women who are on this life journey with us, you're in the right place. You'll find something in each episode to give you hope and encourage you to move from panic to powerful, from rocky to resilient, and from upside down to right side up. This is Tips for the Transition. Hello, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host. And as a career coach, I help professional women who feel stuck. Together, we position them for the career they really want so they can feel fulfilled and create more harmony in their lives. Because when your career isn't a soulful fit, it becomes a soul-sucking experience. So each week in these conversations with inspiring guests, we create resources for you so you can become more confident, resilient, and brave to make the moves you want to make and to do it with more ease and grace. So if something strikes a chord while we're having this conversation and you want more information, check out the show notes below. And you'll find some links to connect with my guest and me. So I'm really looking forward to having this chat because I've brought you an expert on personal branding. And that's a topic I hear a lot about from my clients these days. Along with personal leadership, personal branding can be confusing and a struggle for some. So I'm really happy to introduce you to Sarah Ehlinger, who was an award-winning designer, creative director, and brand strategist for billion-dollar companies until she became her own boss. She's a self-professed personal growth junkie and loves exploring the areas where business and branding and mindset commingle to create magic. We're going to talk about what personal branding is, what it isn't, whether you need it, and if you do need it, what might be tripping you up to get it right. We call this episode A Brand Called You. So I want to welcome Sarah. Sarah Ehlinger, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to have you here. As I said, it's a topic that I hear a lot about from my clients, and I really want to dig into this with you. So let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us why, if you would, why you're so passionate about helping others with personal branding.
I think well, first of all, I love branding. I've been in the design and branding world for, almost 2 decades now. And so I just love it. But it was when about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, when I left the corporate world and started my own business, started realizing what a different experience it is when you're building a brand around yourself. And also, I started realizing how learning these skills about building a brand around yourself is not just for freelancers or entrepreneurs, or people starting their own business. I started realizing that the skills that I was, kind of taking from my corporate experience and now applying to myself were also super relevant to anybody who wants to make any sort of career moves or pivots. And we are living in a world right now that makes it so easy. Like, look at what we're doing right now, streaming out to the world live. It just makes it so easy to grab these tools and apply them to yourself in order to, create those career moves of your dreams. So that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it. And I think, sometimes people get tripped up and they really, well, not sometimes, a lot of times people get really tripped up and in their own heads about what this means or what it takes.
I love that. And you're right. I think people do get tripped up. And I really am interested in getting to what is it about personal branding that, especially a lot of my clients are professional corporate women, and they think that it may not be necessary for them to have a personal brand. And I love what you said, that you learned that it's actually an effective tool for even people in corporate. So let's talk about how people even know if building a personal brand is right for them, like for the people in corporate.
Right.
And if it is right for them, where do they start?
Yeah. So, I mean, my answer to that would be like, it's right for everybody. Because it's like, it's not going to hurt you, like, and so it's right for everybody.
Well, it
Um,
also helps you when you do this work, right? Because it is a little bit of work. When you do it, you kind of know who you are and how to show up, don't you?
yeah, it takes a lot of personal reflection. And I always say that um, branding work is mindset work and mindset work is branding work. Because once you really get to know yourself, and then it's not just getting to know yourself, it's putting yourself out there. And so that requires a certain amount of vulnerability. It requires a certain amount of, sharing your own opinions, even if you think that, other people may not agree with them. And by that, I mean, so something that I see with a lot of my clients is that a lot of times when they go to put stuff out online, they get tripped up because there's like that person in the back of their head. And so for your audience, my guess is that person in the back of their head is like a former coworker. And like that's one that I had for a long time. I was like, oh, what are people that I used to work with? Like, what are they going to think of me if I put this opinion out about my industry, or if I, start stepping out in what I'm doing in a different way than maybe I was in the context that they knew me. And so in that way, you really have to do a lot of personal reflection and get to know what your perspective is. And then you have to learn how to shut down those voices that really aren't true. Like I learned, like my former coworkers, like none of them were judging me. That was just all in my imagination. Like we all do that, that's our thing in our brain, our little protection mechanism in our brain. That's like, oh, I don't know, this might make you stand out. Standing out could be scary. our brain wants to shut that down, but standing out is what you want, right? And I say this work is great for everybody because we live in an age now where if you are, applying for a new job or trying to make a pivot in your career, like, yes, you're going to apply for the job and you're going to have the resumes and you're going to have all the interviews and all of the stuff, but you're also going to be Googled. And so all of that stuff is going to show up. So why would you not take the opportunity, especially with something like LinkedIn? Why would you not take the opportunity to build your thought leadership and your authority in the direction that you want to move towards, that you want to pivot towards? Because then that shows to people that, like, you're in it. You're in it and you want to do it, and it gives you so much more instant authority that maybe other people aren't in your industry aren't going to have and aren't building up.
That's such a brilliant commentary. I love that you said that. And the way you put it, why wouldn't you, if there is something you aspire to be or to do in your career, why wouldn't you position yourself for that?
Right.
And that's something I talk with my clients about all the time, is positioning them for what they want. And branding, personal branding, is part of that positioning.
Yeah. And I think, I would guess that a lot of your clients are, when they think about branding, they're like, oh, that means I have to like have a logo and like have a color palette and I'm selling something. It's like, well, no, what you're selling is yourself. And whether you know it or not, like, all of us, because we're all online now, all of us are creating a brand around ourselves because we are pre-selecting what we're sharing. We're doing it without even realizing it. So once you acknowledge that you're already doing it, then you get to be more intentional about how you're curating that. And I don't mean just like, people talk a lot about, especially with, the Instagram world, people talk a lot about sharing the highlight reel or just sharing. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how do you become intentional about the influence and impact that you want to have on the world and how you share that. And you can certainly do that for yourself. You can cultivate that for yourself, even if you're not running your business, even if you're still in the corporate world. Like, that's something that even before social media, I was doing that. I realized in retrospect, because I was operating as an intrapreneur within the corporate world. And part of that was personally branding myself to my other coworkers. Like, I was showing them that I was this scrappy go-getter who was going to invent my own positions for myself. And so they learned to expect that from me.
Right.
So even if you're scared about social media, you can still be cultivating, like, how do you want other people to view you? Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. And it's about how you show up. It's about what you write about. It's about what interests you and you share. And the commentary you make about what you share.
Yeah.
It's
and I think LinkedIn is the brilliant platform for that. Like, just so brilliant, because you can start sharing your thought leadership and your perspective and curating and cultivating how other people see you in the corporate world through that platform, like, so easily. It's such a brilliant platform for that.
It is. And if you use the platform, if you leverage the power of that platform by making connections, by creating relationships with the connections you make, it is a brilliant way to get your brand noticed and supported so that it builds and organically. Right?
Yeah. And the other thing, I'm glad you brought that up, organically, because the other thing is, once you start doing this, it's not just about you going and getting those opportunities. Once you start building this brand of you,
Yeah,
opportunities start coming to you because you're putting that energy out into the world. And so then it
exactly.
naturally starts coming back to you. And so opportunities and pivots and transitions that you maybe didn't even dream about start showing up because
Exactly. Right.
you give something for other people to respond to, where they take notice of you and go, I never thought about this, but like and now I'm considering this person for this,
Right.
XYZ.
Right. And that's why the inner work, the personal work that it takes to do first, that concept of figuring out who are you now that you want to make a change or that something has changed for you. Who do you want to become? How do you want to be seen? How do you want to position yourself for what you want next? And that's all that, foundational work that needs to be done. I know you do it when you're working with people for personal branding, and I do it for people in career transition. It's the same kind of work. It's the same
Yeah,
kind of work.
and
Yeah,
it's, something that I see almost everybody do, and I still do it. Like, we all do this and we will all continue to do this, and you just have to catch yourself. And that is, you kind of look around and you go, well, what is everybody else doing? Like, what are
mm,
they doing? And I'll
yeah,
just do that, and then that will
yeah,
get me what I want.
right,
And that's fine, because it like opens up some, gets us trying new things or doing other stuff. But ultimately, that's the backwards way of doing things. Like what you were just talking about, figuring out that foundational stuff, like who am I? Where am I going? What do I want? How do I want to position myself? Like really figuring out that like deep personal work,
right. What do I
and
value
then
most?
showing up to put yourself out there is like the better way to do it, because
Yeah,
then you're so stable in who you want to show up as that, you're unflappable. Whereas when you're kind of just looking around and copying people, you're a little graspy. You're a little like, why isn't this
right.
working? Why isn't this working? It's like, because you don't really know why you're doing it. You're just kind
So
of
is that one
copying
of
what
the
everybody else is
things,
doing.
right? Is that one of the things that people get wrong by when
Oh,
they start approaching personal branding?
100%. A
Yeah,
100%. Like that is like the number one thing that people get wrong, but like it's human nature because our brains are wired for connection. Like our brains want us to belong. There's actually been studies that show that our brains, when we're rejected, when we're not belonging in the community, our brains will actually, the same things get triggered in our brain, that it's the same brain patterns that registers physical pain. So emotional rejection, not belonging, and physical pain is like the same brain waves. So of course you're going to look around and be like, well, what's everybody else doing? Because I'm going to do more of that because I want to be part of the crowd. I want to belong. Because the minute you kind of step out and do something out of that norm, you're opening yourself up to rejection.
yeah,
And that means your brain is like, no, you're opening yourself up to pain. So it wants to stop you from doing that. So, but once you're aware of that, then you can actually, be like, okay, no, I understand you're trying to keep me safe, but I also am moving in this bigger, bolder direction. And I want to do something different with my life. And so that requires me to risk this rejection. And the irony is, doing that, putting yourself out there and opening yourself up to that, almost all of the time means you're creating more meaningful connections with people.
right.
You're creating
Yeah,
more of that authority and thought leadership. So
yeah,
it's this push and pull that you just got to
yeah.
like ride.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And it's a roller coaster ride.
It is a
It can,
roller coaster
yeah.
ride for sure.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. But getting to know ourselves always is, right? When we begin to dig into the things that pop up that we are fearful of, right? The rejection, the fear of the unknown. What will happen? What will people think if I show up differently than they've seen me, like you said before?
Right.
And then those beliefs that they harbor for many 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 years maybe, and dispelling some of those beliefs and figuring out what they want to believe instead. That's all roller coaster kind of work, but it's essential, I think, for each of us to become who we are as individuals, uniquely us. That we titled this show A Brand Called You, and there is nobody else exactly like you. So when you come up with that personal brand that is unique, authentic, and you can step into that and and just lead with it, there's nothing that speaks confidence better than that.
No, there's not. And that's the thing of it is, like you said, like when you come up with it, and it's not even a matter of coming up with it. It's a matter of
Letting it come out.
letting it come through.
Yeah.
Getting out of your own way and letting it come
Yeah.
through because it's already
Yeah.
there. And that's
Yeah.
what makes it so scary and hard because you're like, oh my God, if I show myself and then people don't like it, or I don't get the job, or it doesn't go, like, then what does that mean about me? And you have
Okay.
to like really get to the point where you're like, it doesn't mean anything about me. It just means that this isn't the right opportunity, and you keep
Exactly.
going, and
Exactly.
because it's a super awkward process,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
super, super awkward.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about, you talked about it earlier, how personal branding mindset, very closely entwined. So when you think about personal branding, why is personal growth and mindset work so important?
I mean, I think it's because of all of the stuff we've already talked about, because if you don't do that work first, or I shouldn't even say first, because it's such an ongoing, like it never ends.
Right.
So it makes, when I say do it first, it makes it sound like, oh, you do this and then it's done. And then you go on to do, it's like, no, it's an ongoing thing. But if you're not actively engaged in discovering who you are, whatever you put out, like however you show up in your job or online, or like wherever you're creating and cultivating this brand of you, it's not going to feel genuine if you don't continue to engage in this personal work, because it's just not going to feel like you. It's going to feel flat. And I think we see that all the time, when you follow people online. It's really easy to use the online example, or even like people who are in positions of leadership in the corporate world. You do that because they really let themselves shine through. And 9 times out of 10, they're letting that version of themselves shine through because they're constantly doing that personal work. And when they're not, it all kind of just comes off flat, and it may
Right.
work, like some of the stuff will resonate, but ultimately in the long run, if you really want to propel yourself, you have to keep it's like peeling back the layers of the onion. You have to just keep peeling those layers and discovering things about yourself. um and in that way, then it becomes fun.
Right. And so it's allowing, because as human beings, we evolve over time, right?
Yes.
Our
Yes.
values change, our beliefs change, what's important to us changes. The situations we're in change us. And if we don't evolve with that, our personal branding needs to evolve with that as well.
Yes.
Or, like you said, it will not be a good fit any longer. And if we try to stay in the old brand and not evolve as we evolve, not evolve it as we evolve, then it's not going to be what I like to call a soulful fit.
No, that's a great, I love that soulful fit. That's a great way to describe it. I mean, I even saw it in myself in the last couple of years. I was talking about branding really from um, like more like corporate speak or more like, like the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
And that the way that I was putting that out there was not keeping pace with the way that I actually thought about it, which is this, like what I'm expressing to you today. And so, that messaging wasn't resonating as much because I had evolved past that.
Right.
But I wasn't taking the time to say, like, oh, I really want to talk about branding in a different way than most people are talking about it. But then I had to do the personal work and be like, oh, I'm talking about this differently. Oh, what are people going to think of me? Oh, like we all go through it.
The same thing,
And
right?
every time you go to a next level, you're going to go through it again.
Yep. Yep.
But like
Yep.
knowing that makes the process like way less painful. Not that
Well,
it's a
and
painful
we can
process, but
we
you
can
know what I'm
just be
saying.
we can just be curious about it instead
Curious.
of try
Exactly.
to resist it, right? Because we are ever changing. So if we resist that, then we're going to get stuck. We're going to get stuck where we don't belong. But if we
Yep.
accept that we change and that we are ever evolving, and therefore everything about us, including our personal brand, needs to evolve too, then it's an acceptance that this is just the way it works. This is the
Yeah.
way it works. So don't
Yeah.
resist it. Get curious about what's changing. Figure out what your mindset work needs to what mindset work you need to do to shift with it. Yeah, this is a brilliant conversation because so many people, I think, are overwhelmed by it. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, some of our listeners may have lots of ideas and they're trying all kinds of things to bring their personal brand to life, but they might be struggling to get traction, or they may just be confused and overwhelmed about what to do next. So
Mm-hmm.
where might they be doing the things in the wrong order, or maybe where should they start?
Yeah, I think, and that's a great question because I think it's really easy to, once you start doing this, you'll get really excited and you'll be like, okay, I need to do this and I need to do this. And now I'm going to put articles on LinkedIn and then I'm going to do this. And then, like all of the things. And while that's exciting for like a little bit, it quickly moves into overwhelm because it's so much to do when you're just like, I already have a job and a life and kids and hobbies and a home and all of the things. And then like it shuts it down and then you do nothing.
Yeah.
So I like to say, bring it back to, well, number one, like start out with that like personal work. Like what are those things in your industry or in the area of thought leadership that you're really passionate about, and just start talking about them. Just start talking about them. It doesn't even have to be online. Like it could just be with your coworkers or your boss or your, like whoever. And then the next step is like, but then it could be online. You could start posting it on LinkedIn, start, writing articles for that. I know that takes time, but the next step is just to like stop thinking about like all of the things that could go into building this and just start thinking, like you said, I love that you use the word get curious. It's like, get curious about like, what's one tiny thing that I can do like this week? Like, what's one little thing, like one next thing, and just like do that. And then just keep doing that until you build that muscle up of expressing and sharing yourself and getting curious about like what it means to create a brand around yourself, and just do like those little things. And it might be just like resharing an article, or a really great place. It's so interesting. A really great place that I tell a lot of people to start off is like, what makes you really mad about your industry? Like, what makes you really mad? And people just like there's a bunch of stuff that they can rattle off. That's a great place to start in like sharing, things that you would change about your industry, things that you would do differently. So it's really about just taking those little teeny tiny baby steps, because over time, those teeny tiny baby steps lead up to a lot. And as you're doing that, your confidence around this work of building a brand around yourself is just going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until it becomes effortless, doing this work, and you'll just get so much better at it.
Yeah, I love that. And if you are sharing what you would change about your industry, and you're doing that online, what I love about usually what happens with those kinds of posts is that they solicit conversation. Other people are going to read that and go, "Oh, I agree." And I'd say this about that. And now you've got
100%, 100%.
And that
because if you have the opinion, somebody else does too.
Absolutely. It's very likely that you're not the only one who has an idea about how to change something to make it better. And that's always a great place to start a conversation. I love that.
And I love it how you phrase it too, like start a conversation. I think that, people get tripped up and they think like, oh, now I'm trying to build my authority and my thought leadership. It's like, approach it from that perspective. It's like, no, I'm just trying to start a conversation. I'm just trying to start a conversation around like our industry or these ideas or, these opinions about how things could be different. And when you approach it like that, it makes it so much easier, because we start conversations every day, all day long.
Exactly. Those are easy to do.
Yeah. So and that is brand building.
And it's brand building, believe it or not. Yes. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about setbacks. So you talked about a couple of them for yourself, but are there any other setbacks that taught you something about this on your career journey, and how did maybe you learn to use those as opportunities to grow?
Yeah, great. Love this topic. So in my corporate career, I was actually laid off 2 separate times. I was laid off in 2001, and then I was laid off again in 2008. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I pivoted my whole business because, that's what a lot of people were doing at that time. And looking back, and I think this is a great thing to consider when talking about building your personal brand. When I look back on those times, the thing that made me grow, the thing that gave me some resilience during those times is that I had and we all find ourselves in these positions. I had no control over what was happening. It's like I had no control, and I had to surrender into that unknowing and not knowing, like, I don't know what these results are going to be. And both times when I got laid off, both of those times, I ended up pivoting and creating a completely different career path or business path for myself. And it was because I decided in those moments that I was just going to completely embrace the unknown instead of, and which involves a lot of just like opening your hand and letting go to opportunity. And I'm so glad I did, because I ended up in places and doing things that I never would have imagined or considered for myself, Because when you open up to that unknowable possibility and just, like all the things we're talking about in this call, opening yourself up to just putting yourself out there, expressing yourself, building a brand around yourself, suddenly opportunities show up when you're like, I'm open. I don't know what's happening. I don't have any control over this situation. So I'm open to whatever shows up. There's like some beauty and magic in doing that.
You're so right about that. Beauty and magic. I love that you put it that way. When we stop resisting, right? When we stop thinking that it has to be a certain way because that's the way it's always been. When we stop doing that to ourselves, then it makes things so much easier.
It
I
does.
talk about
I mean,
doing
and
things.
it's not easy to do, to do
It's
that
not
though.
it's not easy to do, but it makes it easier when we stop the resistance, right? When we start accepting that, okay, I got laid off. I got laid off too. And it took me a while to get past that and figure out that I could look at it differently. What if the question that flipped the switch for me was a colleague asking me, what if it was your idea, Maria? What would you do then? And it just flipped, it
Mm,
switched for me so that I could
interesting.
look at it differently. And that's what we need to do when something happens to us. Start
I
thinking
love that.
about what about this is happening for us, right? Just flipping the scenario around. Yeah. We could talk about this for for
All
days. I
day.
know, all day.
All
But
day.
we have to wrap it up. And I want to do one last thing with you, if you don't mind. At the end of every episode, I ask my guests to share some practical tips and strategies that our audience can take away and use. And it's why I call the show Tips for the Transition. So, Sarah, what helpful tips and strategies do you have to share with us today?
Yeah. So I think there's so many, and we talked about some of them already. I think number one is to just embrace being yourself and don't be afraid of showing your personality. Especially, I think, for a lot of your listeners who are in the corporate world, it's like really hard to embrace showing that personality, but like that is the thing that people are going to be drawn to. So that's number one. Don't be afraid to show that personality. Number two is use social media to your advantage. Like almost all of us, I'm not going to say everybody because some people don't use it and that's great too, but like almost all of us are using it already. We're picking different parts of our lives to curate and put out there. So like, why not start using it to your advantage, especially with something like LinkedIn that really shows that thought leadership side of you. And don't be afraid to use it in non-traditional ways, in ways that like resonate with you versus just looking around and seeing what everybody else is doing. The next one would be, and this is something I touched on just a little bit, and that's to create your own opportunities. And so, like for me, that meant, as a business owner, I look around and I'm like, oh, what kind of opportunities can I create? But I realized that I was also doing that in the corporate world. Like I was looking around and going, I don't necessarily like the way things are being done in this certain area, or I see that like things could be better here or done differently. And so I would just create my own opportunities. And sometimes that meant, I would have to pitch myself, making up my own title, making up my own job description. And it's like those opportunities might be sitting right there for you because you're already seeing things that you want to be done differently or change, but like you got to go and get them. So you got to create your own opportunity there.
Those are so good, Sarah.
Yeah.
Those are so good. Yeah, creating your own opportunities it's a brilliant way to let other people know how much you care, how attentive you are. You're noticing
Yeah.
what's going on. You want to be involved. You want to make it better. That's personal brand right
Yeah.
there. You
And
are
it's
stepping in.
scary.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's scary and you might be rejected. In fact, in the corporate world, there's a high likelihood that you will be rejected.
yeah,
But what will happen is the people that you pitch yourself to will start to look at you differently,
differently. Yeah,
which is a
yeah,
really great thing. So even if
yeah,
you don't get
yeah.
that particular opportunity, they're going to start going, huh, like this person is
Well, that's
building something
showing
around
personal,
themselves.
and it's showing personal leadership, right?
Hmm.
So that's part of branding, personal leadership. That's a whole nother topic.
Yep, whole nother topic.
Whole nother topic. Oh my, Sarah, thank you. This was a great episode. I loved this conversation with you. I think a lot of people will get a lot of tips out of this as they listen to it. So, and I know that some of them are going to want to connect with you directly. So, would you share with us the one best way they can do that?
Yeah, the best way is you can find me on my website, which is bbrandspankingyou.com. That's BEBRANDSPANKINGYOU.com, bbrandspankingyou.com. Also, I'm really active on Instagram, so you can find me there at brandspankingyou. And you can, DM me and we can start a chat there.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. I really
Thank you. This
appreciate
was
you
a
coming.
this is a blast.
Oh, good. I'm glad you had fun. So did I. And I hope that our audience just felt that energy coming from us today. So thank you again for being with us.
You're so welcome.
And I want to thank everyone for watching and listening as well. I appreciate that you're a part of our community. As I said before, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would leave a comment or a review. If there's a star rating where you're watching or listening, pick a star, pick a star. And I also said that I love to create resources for professional women who feel stuck in their careers. So if something in this episode resonates with you, I would love to continue that conversation. We can do that in my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. The link for that is also below with all of the links that you can get connected to Sarah as well as to me. So let's meet again here next Wednesday and every Wednesday at the same time, because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.